So let's go ahead and move on here. Here we have a simple network, right? This is about as basic as it gets. We've got our router, we've got a switch, and all we want to do is get in the path of these packets and start monitoring what's going on. So first thing we're going to do is put on the old glasses so we can see what's going on here. But what I can do is I can come into this network right here and I can break that link. Now, one option I have is I could come in and I could grab my 1 gig IOTA. Now, the IOTA, we've got presentations on this. We can talk about the IOTA a little bit. In fact, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send those in, because you've got, again, 2 of the best people, actually 3 of the best people out there to answer these questions. But here we've got our IOTA. Now, the neat thing with the IOTA is the IOTA does capture to disk. So it's got a 1 terabyte drive in it. It's got an integrated fault-tolerant tap. So now I could come in and I could take this cable and plug it into port A. I could take this cable out of port B, plug that in there, and now I'm in the path of those packets. I'm capturing at full line rate 1 gig, or I could put the 10 gig IOTA in there and capture at 10 gig. But I'm capturing this and I'm using Pvt.Ltd to go in and start looking at that traffic that's going across and seeing who's talking to whom, what applications are running across there. We'll touch on the IOTA. This is not an IOTA presentation, but we're going to use the IOTA to validate the rules that we're creating using the packet broker. So this is great. Now, this requires I break that link. So I've got to break that link to put it in. Now, from a traditional standpoint, a little better option here. So we're going to take our IOTA right here. Technology, always a challenge, but we're going to take our tap. So now what I could do is I could do something like grab a 1 gig copper tap right here. And I could take that 1 gig copper tap and I could throw that in line between that connection. Now, one of the advantages of taking that 1 gig tap and throwing that in line is I do that once. So now I don't have to go back and break that link again. And what I could do in this situation is I could come over here, I could come out of port B, I could grab my monitor port B right here, and I could bring that over into port B of my IOTA. I could take monitor port A, bring that over here into port A, and now I can capture full duplex line rate traffic. But the thing is, I don't have to break the link every time I want to go in and monitor. So from a very simple standpoint, this is where we could go in, we could put a tap in a key location, we could take our monitoring tool and go in and start monitoring. The challenge here becomes when we want to move beyond a simple network. So now we move to a not so simple network. With our not so simple network, we've got a link going out to the internet outside our firewall. We've got between the firewall and the router, between the router and the switches, and between our MDF switch, our IDF switches. We want to be able to come in and monitor that. So now, how do I start approaching this? Well, one option is, this is where I could come in with something like my booster. Now the booster has 4 inline taps right here. So each one of these is capable of tapping into 10, 100, or gig links, passing traffic at full line rate, capturing that or forwarding that traffic out the output port at full line rate. So I could come in and I could start taking, I could break this link, I could break that link, I could break that link, and now let's just say this link. So now, if I come in here, I could take and throw this link in here. I could take this link over here. It starts looking a little messy, but I could start putting this in line with all these links. So now I'm monitoring each of those links. Now, the most traffic that could come out of this would be 8 gigabits per second. That would be all of these operating full line rate, full duplex. So we're not going to oversubscribe our output port. Then I could come in, I could go to my analyzers, I could grab a 10 gig IOTA, I could throw that in here, come out of my 10 gig port. A lot of times I'll just use a DAC cable. I could use a fiber. I could use copper. I could come out of here, plug that in there, and away I go. So now I'm capturing. I've broken into 4 of those links. So we've scaled up a little bit. But what happens in a regular big network, right? I mean, this is still pretty small. So what happens with network monitoring is once you start network monitoring, you become addicted. You realize that you can start monitoring numerous places and collecting all kinds of data. You can capture over extended periods of time, and then you can go in and start taking a look at what happened in the past. So this is where we move up in our network a little bit. We start going in and putting in taps. So like in this case, here is a 1/3 U 8 tap unit. So this has 8 inline taps built into it. So now I've got 8 outputs. Okay. So I step up from there a little bit, and that works really well for tapping my fiber links. So now I want to step that up just a little bit. So I throw in some boosters. So I start putting these boosters in key locations where I want to monitor some copper links. And the nice thing here is I can monitor 10, 100, 1000 copper links, and I can send that out at 10 gig. Well, monitoring doesn't happen unless we throw in our monitoring equipment. So in this case, I've got my network forensics and analytics equipment. I've got my network performance and visibility. I've got my security monitoring. And over here, I've got one of my IOTAs set up. And I'll show you, just like we're going to do today, I can use this for doing network validation. Or for validating the rule sets that I'm going to implement. Also, this gives me back in time monitoring. But here's the thing, there's a 1 terabyte drive on there. If I start dumping all of my network traffic to that, I'm going to fill that drive up in a pretty quick or short amount of time. But if I'm selective about the data that I send out to that analyzer, I can now go in and start extending the amount of time I can capture. And anybody that's gone in and done network troubleshooting knows that you get a call and the person said, hey, had a network problem. You say, when did it happen? Oh, I don't know, like last Tuesday at 3 p.m. So now we need to be able to go back in time and see what happened. So by being able to have a device like that, we don't need something that can capture multiple terabytes worth of traffic if we're sending the traffic to that very selectively. So you'll notice that there's a big gap in the middle. How do we fill in that gap? How do we aggregate this traffic that's coming in from all these different sources? Filter on it, and then distribute that out to the devices we're using for monitoring. Okay. Well, this is where our packet broker comes in. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the X2 3200G. This is a 32-port packet broker. Each of these ports is capable of doing 10, 25, 40, or 100 gig. So we've got 32 ports in here. And these ports can be used as input ports or output ports. So as we go in and start configuring our rules and our rule sets, we're going to say that this port is input coming in. This port is output going to one of our pieces of analysis equipment. So now, with these ports, like in the setup that I've got here, what I've done is we come out of one of our boosters right here, and we come into this port right here. Now, this port has a fan-out cable, and that fan-out cable has 4 10 gig connections on it. So I can then take this booster right here, plug that into the second of 4 ports on that one physical port. I can plug this booster into the third one. I can take and come out of this tap and plug that into the fourth one. Plug this one in here. Plug this one in here. So now what you see is if I'm operating at 10 gig, if I have 10 gig links, oops, too far, I can start getting a tremendous number of inputs coming into my packet broker. So now I've got data coming from all different sources within my network, inside the firewall, outside the firewall, in front of servers, in front of key locations where I need to be able to monitor traffic. So within this packet broker, I can now start applying rules. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and build some rules today and look at how those rules can be implemented. Key features of this packet broker, as well as others, is deduplication. What I want to avoid is if I am tapped in such a way that I see the same packet multiple times, I need to be able to come in and deduplicate that while reducing the amount of latency that I'm adding to that deduplication process. So this device needs to look at those packets and say, these are both the same. We're going to deduplicate that before we send that out to the analysis equipment. But we need to be careful, because if we're too overzealous with the deduplication, we can end up throwing packets away that are not duplicates. And that results in lost traffic. And when it comes to doing analysis, I would prefer to have cases where I have forwarded the same packet twice, then not forwarded a packet that was not a duplicate. And that's what we see here, is this allows us that if it's going to lean toward the side of sending a duplicate packet as opposed to sending a non-duplicate packet falsely or throwing that packet away. So with our packet broker in the middle, I can now come in and start choosing my outputs. And these don't have to be in any particular location on here, but I'm just going to grab this bottom port right here. So I could take and send traffic out to my network forensics and analytics. I could send traffic out to my network performance and visibility. I could come over here. I could send traffic to my security analyzer, and I could send traffic over here to my IOTA. Now through the rules, I can now come in and I can start setting up that aggregation and distribution process. I can say that I'm going to take the traffic for here, I'm going to send it over here. I'm going to take the traffic for here and send it over there. And I really want to emphasize that not only does this allow us to optimize the analysis tools we have, you may have a piece of analysis equipment that isn't capable of monitoring traffic at 100 gig. But we can come in here and monitor 100 gig links, and we can selectively pull the traffic out of those 100 gig links and send it off to an analyzer that's operating at 10 gig. So what this does is it allows us to take tools that couldn't handle that full fire hose worth of traffic and give them just the traffic they need. And one of the tendencies that we find when people start initially analyzing network traffic is they want everything. I want to see everything. And you can kind of tell as they mature through that process of learning to do network troubleshooting and monitoring, and they'll say, well, you know, I don't want everything. This is what I want.